For most of us, Liberia probably feels like a historical footnote, right? It's that small African nation with a capital named after a U.S. president and a flag that looks, well, really familiar. But this story is actually one of the most revealing and, frankly, contradictory chapters in American history, a chapter the U.S. tried to quietly walk away from while never, ever truly letting go.
So that's the big question we're tackling here. Did the United States really just give up on Liberia? Well, the simple answer is no, not at all. And the more complicated, fascinating answer is what we're about to get into.
See, the U.S. didn't just walk away. It made a very calculated decision. The strategy was simple. Abandon the parts that were inconvenient, but protect, and I mean really protect, the parts that were useful. And that core idea, ditching the responsibility while holding on to the benefits, that is the key to this entire story.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning, with America's unofficial colony. The whole thing is really built on this foundation of plausible deniability, of creating something and then pretending you had nothing to do with it.
And this right here, this lays out the massive hypocrisy at the heart of it all. In the early 1800s, America was on the world stage, loudly talking about how it was the great anti-empire, the defender of freedom. But at the exact same time, it was helping to create its very own colony in West Africa. This contradiction is everything.
And make no mistake, this wasn't just some distant, unrelated project. Liberia was designed piece by piece to be a mirror image of the United States. I mean, you can see it in the flag, you can see it in the Constitution they wrote. The whole thing was built with American money and leadership. The settlers themselves, who were free Black Americans, often thought of themselves as Americans abroad, taking these ideals to a new continent.
So you might think this project was born from some grand, idealistic vision of freedom and opportunity. But the truth is, it wasn't. It was born from something much, much darker. It was born from fear.
The main engine behind this whole thing was an organization called the American Colonization Society, or the ACS, and their mission was chillingly clear. You see, in early America, with a massive enslaved population and a growing number of free Black citizens, the ACS had a solution to the country's racial crisis. And it wasn't justice, it wasn't equality, it was removal.
And this is where it gets really weird, because this plan created this bizarre political alliance. On one side, you had white supremacists who saw free Black Americans as a fundamental threat to the social order. On the other side, you had some genuinely well-meaning abolitionists who just believed that Black people could never, ever be safe or equal in the U.S. These two groups hated each other, but they landed on the exact same solution: relocation.
But here's what's absolutely crucial to remember. This was not a popular idea among the very people it was supposed to be for. Not at all. Free Black communities almost universally rejected it. Their leaders, their newspapers, they kept asking this incredibly powerful question: why should we leave a country we built? They saw the ACS plan for exactly what it was: an act of exile.
So despite all that opposition, the colony got off the ground. And almost immediately, it turned into a political nightmare for Washington. It was this ticking time bomb that no president wanted to touch.
And the deepest irony here is that the colony meant to solve America's racial problems just exported them. A new ruling class of settlers, the Americo-Liberians, quickly formed. And they set up a social hierarchy that put them at the top above the indigenous African populations, basically recreating the very power dynamics they'd left behind.
So how did Washington deal with this incredibly messy situation? Well, they built this carefully crafted illusion. They had this hands-off but helpful strategy. They'd funnel money indirectly, they'd send supplies, they'd even allow U.S. Navy ships to escort settler ships. But officially, they insisted over and over again, Liberia is not our colony. It was the perfect way to have all the influence with zero accountability.
But of course, that couldn't last forever. For starters, the ACS, the private group running the whole show, was going bankrupt. At the same time, the colony was becoming a huge political headache back home. And with the U.S. government refusing to officially step in, the entire project was just drifting towards total collapse. There was only one clean way out.
And so, in 1847, Liberia declared its independence. And you know what the U.S. did to stop it? Absolutely nothing. Why? Because it was the perfect solution for America. In one move, it erased the accusation of colonialism, it cut off the financial bleeding, and it totally silenced the political debate. It was, in short, liberation by convenience.
But the story doesn't end in 1847, not by a long shot. For decades, Liberia kind of just faded into the background. But then, global politics shifted in a huge way, and this forgotten little American project suddenly became incredibly valuable again. This timeline just shows that pivot perfectly. What was a political burden in 1847 became a critical strategic asset by the mid-20th century. During World War II, the U.S. built these huge vital airfields there. The Firestone Company moved in and basically controlled the world's rubber supply from its massive plantations. And then, during the Cold War, Liberia became a key U.S. intelligence and communications hub in Africa.
So here's the kicker. Even though Liberia was, on paper, a totally independent nation, American influence was everywhere. Its entire economy was propped up by companies like Firestone and U.S. loans. Its security was completely tied to American military interests, and its government was basically dependent on American diplomatic support to survive.
And this, right here, really gets to the absolute heart of it. By encouraging Liberia's independence all those years ago, the U.S. had accidentally stumbled into the perfect geopolitical arrangement. It had all the strategic benefits of a colony, the resources, the location, the political loyalty, with none of the moral baggage or the administrative headaches. It was, quite simply, power with guilt.
Okay, so let's bring this all home. We've seen the complicated, fear-driven birth of Liberia, the convenient abandonment, and then the strategic re-engagement. So what's the final verdict here?
Let's go all the way back to that first question we asked. Now that we have all the pieces on the table, we can answer it. Why did the U.S. seem to just give up Liberia?
Well, here are the real reasons. The whole project was born from America's own racial crisis that it refused to confront at home. It exposed a massive hypocrisy of America's supposed anti-imperial identity. It became way too expensive and politically toxic to manage directly. And maybe most importantly, the U.S. figured out that it could get way more of what it wanted through informal influence than it ever could through direct, official rule.
And that leaves us with this final powerful thought. The United States never truly gave up Liberia. It just gave up the responsibility. It found a way to keep all the benefits while shedding every single one of the burdens. And that's a story that reveals far more about America itself than it does about the small nation it created.